Well, welcome to the 15th annual Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award. It was the brainchild of Dr. Tony Ryan, who founded Ryanair before getting involved in racing and breeding. And he bought Castleton Lyons back in the early aughts, I believe, when he was developing his interest in racing. And so among his other interests besides aviation and racing was literature. And so in 2006, Dr. Ryan approached me to start a book award to help promote literature in racing. And the first winner was Joe Drape for Black Maestro, and that was awarded in 2006. And since then, there's been 13 other winners since then, with 11 nonfiction and 3 fiction. And so we had a wide variety of winners. And one thing they all had in common, they're all really good and wonderful books that feature thoroughbred racing, which is what Dr. Ryan was interested in. Unfortunately, Dr. Ryan died in October of 2007. And we renamed the award in honor of him in 2008. And Shane Ryan, who's the owner of Castleton Lyons, has been a benefactor of racing literature ever since and nurtured the award. Shane, in his own right, has been a very successful owner and breeder. Among his horses was his homebred, Gio Ponte, who won multiple Eclipse Awards and $6.1 million. And Shane owns, besides Castleton Lyons in Lexington, he owns a farm in Ireland. And so we want to thank Shane for continuing to sponsor this award through all the trials and tribulations the last couple of years. And we've had 2 years in a row, we've had a Zoom award, unfortunately. And at least we're having it, which is nice. And last year, it traditionally has been held in the spring. And so hopefully by next spring, we can have the award again in the Stallion Barn at Castleton Lyons like it was the first 13 years. And unfortunately, the 3 finalists this year don't have the opportunity to speak before a live audience in the Stallion Barn, the historic Stallion Barn there. And hopefully you'll all join us there next year. And speaking of the historic Stallion Barn, and speaking of the Kentucky Derby, in the Stallion Barn is not just Gio Ponte, but also Portonico, who's the sire of Medina Spirits. And so obviously all this brouhaha surrounding the whole scene, but doesn't take away from away from rather Portonico's achievement in getting a Kentucky Derby winner in his first crop. I know everybody at Castleton Lyons is very excited to have that horse in the Stallion Barn, and the future is very bright for him. And as an aside, for anybody who's interested in how long this thing's going to take, this thing's just started. This may take years. So in the 2011, the Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award winner was written by Milt Toby, which was Dancer's Image, the forgotten story of the 1968 Kentucky Derby. And so he went through the whole process of the appeals and the lawsuits, everything, and it was a really good book. So we might have another, I guess someone could write a book about this one, and maybe 2 or 3 years from now they'll win the book award. So anyway, back to this year's award. So this year's award, as in past, the winner will receive a check for $10,000 and a Tipperary crystal trophy. And each of the runners-up will receive a $1,000 check and a trophy of Tipperary crystal. And before we go on to the award ceremony itself, I want to thank Betsy Hager for all of her hard work and, again, organizing this annual event, and for everybody else at Castleton Lyons. And thanks Shane once again for sponsoring this book award, which with a $10,000 first prize is one of the richest book awards in this country. So that's a lot to be said for that. And hopefully we'll continue to encourage good books on racing. I want to thank all the judges for their hard work, and okay, we'll talk about that. And thank my wife, Mary, for also, as usual, for the 15th year. She helped organize all submissions and puts out the press releases and takes care of that end. So now I'll introduce Kay Coyte, who is the head judge now for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe more. She's a former editor of the Washington Post, has a background in racing. And she again organized this, and we'll have turn over to Kay to introduce the judges and also talk about the books and also the judging process. Kay?
Thank you, Mark. I'm sitting here in the offices of Castleton Lyons Farm, and behind me here is a portrait of Dr. Tony Ryan. He's on the mantle. right next to Gio Ponte, one of the leading stallions that they have had here at the farm. So he has a place of honor. And on the other side, you probably can't see it as well, but the crystal trophy is on the other. It replicates the Irish tower that Dr. Ryan built on his farm. When he restored Castleton Lyons farm, he wanted to bring a lot of Ireland, the flavor of Ireland, back to the farm. So there's the farm roads are named after towns such as Shannon, and we have a beautiful Irish tower. And really, that's a good portion of why he created the book award, is because of sort of an Irishman's love of literature that he had. In his private home, there were stacks of books in his office and stacks of books on all the end tables around various furniture in the living area and in the public meeting areas. So welcome to this book award. It's another one that's been disrupted by the pandemic, but we carry on. And so I feel like we blinked and we were just here, because we were just here in November, and then we sort of compressed our time frame a little bit to come back around and get it somewhat back on track with an award ceremony in May. Normally we would have it around the Keeneland races in April, when Shane Ryan is back here to join us in person. Hopefully 2022, that's where we'll be again. So the book award traditionally has been judged by 3 people. And we have Caton Bredar of TVG and other horse racing networks in her past, but we have been sort of the consistent, regular year-to-year judges, and it's been a tradition that the 3rd judge has often been an author, and frequently it was the author of the previous year's book award winner. But in other recent years, it was Jane Moore Waldrop, who is an author herself, not in horse racing necessarily, but she's been busy this year with releases of her own books and projects with other authors. So we sort of drafted Mary Simon to come in as our 3rd judge. And between Caton, with her incredible background in horse racing, she's the granddaughter of a Hall of Famer, both in the thoroughbred industry side and the standardbred industry side. She's an Eclipse Award winner herself. She's the daughter of a trainer and has grew up on the back stretches of Illinois. She just knows horses in and out. She's married to a jockey's agent, so she knows that aspect of the game, and she's an ace handicapper. And on top of the work that she does through TVG and other networks, she uses her broadcast skills and her racing background to host all kinds of charity events and other special programs that promote the sport of racing throughout the country. I think that one thing I just wanted to say about the judging, we have people who have the racing background and also the author background. And I have here in front of me some of our early guidelines as to what we look for in a winning book. And it's, it has to cover in some fashion the sport of thoroughbred horse racing, can also be breeding, can also be the industry in another manner. We've had books about history of racetracks. We have had a number of books that have covered the aftercare aspect of horse racing, whether they be books about old friends or Lope, a off-track retirement home for horses in Texas, quite a few. Dr. Ryan wanted to promote the sport of racing with this award. He looked at the Eclipse Awards, which were excellent, and they covered news articles and magazine articles and photography, but there was no award that covered literature, and that's what he wanted to honor. But that being said, we aren't a PR organization here. We're looking for the best book. And we've had books that have covered racing, warts and all. So in addition to the Dancer's Image book that Mark mentioned, the very first book was Black Maestro, that covered the concept of the Jim Crow era that hindered the racing careers of so many Black jockeys at the turn of the 1800s to early 1900s, and was an amazing story of a jockey named Jimmy Wingfield. The very next year was Not by a Long Shot by T.D. Thornton, that was a look at the declining years of Suffolk Downs racetrack, you know, from the aspect of a jockey and track management and other people on the backstretch, just a real deep dive into a year in the life of a racetrack struggling. So we've had a little bit of everything. We've had mystery, we've had fiction, we've had short stories, and this year was certainly no different. We had some very interesting memoirs. We've had, I think one of the first times we've had historical fiction, which the Ruffian book by Precious Mackenzie covered. Some young adult novels, The October Horses by Genevieve McKay, that was a good example. And Genevieve is another example of a group of books that we had a surplus, not a surplus, but quite a few this year, several were by first-time authors. And I always feel that that would make Dr. Ryan smile to see so many first-time authors covering the sport of racing in their work. But I was looking at my evaluation, one of our original evaluation forms for what we looked at for a book award book. You know, some of the things we weighted with some of our thoughts. And one was this book a pleasure to read? Did it grab your attention from the start? And I would say certainly yes, all three of the books that we have this year. Does the book break ground on a subject the author is dealing with? So we always enjoy it when we learn something in a new book. How heartily would you recommend this book to the racing enthusiast? How heartily would you recommend this book to someone with no interest in horse racing, but who enjoys a good book? And these, you know, these are the kind of things that we do consider. Judging is a very subjective thing, and we always have a tough decision when we have we decide on the semifinalists, but we just have to leave out that book that was so close to making it into that group. And the same thing for the decision to go to the three finalists. I'm looking at the background picture of Mark Shrager's Zoom image, and it's the Carter handicap with the three horses hitting the wire at the same time. And I was thinking of that same image driving here and feeling like a lot of these books were perfectly handicapped, like perfectly weighted. They were, quite a few were all hitting that wire, you know, that the quality was very good across the board with these books. So for our next portion of this Zoom ceremony, I will introduce Caton Bredar, which I talked a little bit about. And she is, as I said, a handicapper and a reporter and broadcaster with TVG right now. A lover of books, a voracious reader, and Caton will be the one to introduce all of the authors. Caton, take it away.
Thank you, Kay. And as Kay mentioned, I am a big reader, and I was particularly excited about this year's group of books as a whole, but in particular, the three finalists, because I think this might have been the first time, at least for me as a judge, that all three of the finalists were books that focused on women, strong women, both fictional as well as non-fictional women in racing. So, and with two of the authors being women as well, I really thought it was particularly timely, but also just a wonderful testament to women in racing. Also, as Kay mentioned, one of the things that we look at as judges is, did we learn something? And not trying to you know, toot my own horn, but it sometimes is hard to find something that I didn't know. But this time, all three books, I found a lot of things that I learned or was hearing for the first time, and that is always a great joy to me. And in particular, I have to say I had never heard of Sylvia Bishop ever, and that is very rare, having spent my life on the racetrack, and in particular, spending a lot of time with many of the people that were mentioned in the book. So I thought that was just a wonderful treat this year with all three of the finalists. The first book that we're focusing on is Diane Crump, A Horse Racing Pioneer's Life in the Saddle by Mark Shrager. And Mark is one that has been a finalist before with The Great Sweepstakes of 1877, A True Story of Southern Grit, Gilded Age of Tycoons, and A Race That Galvanized the Nation. which was in 2016. Mark lives in California and has been a prolific author of articles covering just about every aspect of racing, published in Turf and Sports Digest, American Turf Monthly, many others. His article in 1974 in Turf and Sports Digest, 1001 Surefire Ways to Lose a Horse Race, was published in the annual Best Sports Stories anthology. What I loved about the Diane Crump book in particular was not just all the details encompassing Diane's life, both throughout her career and her, of course, historic first ride and throughout her career on the saddle, but also learning so much about her life beyond the racetrack and after her life as a jockey that I found really just as interesting. But also all the stories of the women. And of course, that's something that I've been very interested in. And I think most of us who are fans of racing, particularly women in racing, have always looked for as much as you can find. And interestingly, there really hasn't been that much written about it. So to have that research and those details and that information was really a great pleasure to me, and a lot of things that I had not ever seen before, even though I had really spent a lot of time trying to find that stuff. So I appreciated it very much. Mark, well done with Diane Crump. And if you'd like to say a few words about it, would love to hear more.
Thank you very much, Kate. I would. I'd like to begin by thanking the people at the Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award and at Castleton Lyons for including me as part of what I'm calling the awesome threesome. Any of these finalists would be a deserving winner. All three of these books would grace the bookshelves of anyone who loves to read, whether they're a racing fan or just a civilian. Thanks also to the Ryan family, who have contributed so much to writing and to thoroughbred racing over the years. This is a joyous occasion. I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of it. But I feel I need to start my remarks with something less joyous, which is what it meant to publish a book in 2020, the year of COVID-19. We're all aware of the toll that the novel coronavirus has taken on so many people's lives and health and jobs and all their hopes and dreams. But COVID also made 2020 the wrong year to try to publish a book. And I'm willing to bet that Linda and Vicky have had their own negative experiences with the viruses, with ours did to the publishing industry. Bookstores and museums and libraries and racetrack gift shops shut down for months on end. Publishing houses closed their doors or operated with skeleton crews. I know in my case, the presentations I've been scheduled to do at various museums and libraries were all canceled. And when the stores and the publishers reopened, they were publicizing and ordering new books, not those ancient 2020 volumes in the old catalogs that had gradually sifted down to the bottom of everyone's in baskets. Diane Crump, A Horse Racing Pioneer's Life in the Saddle, was published on May 1st, 2020, and it's still a memorable occasion when I actually find it on a bookstore shelf. And that's been life for those of us who, like Vicky and like Linda, whose hard work led to books published in the year of COVID-19. Which is why it's so important that the Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award celebration is happening tonight, and why the award exists, to remind people that there are still books out there that are good and readable and well-written, and some of them about thoroughbred racing, some of them about other topics. So to all of you who contribute your talents and efforts to the Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award, thank you very much yet again for giving us turf writers the opportunity. Telling Diane Crump's story was both a pleasure and a challenge. Beginning with the obvious, even in the computer age with texts and emails and all of those other technological marvels I sometimes find overwhelming, it's hard to write a biography of a person who lives 3,000 miles away. When you write in California and your publisher is based on the East Coast, it's even harder. But Diane is a one-of-a-kind individual, and that made things easier. No author has ever worked with a more open, more honest subject, and I was uniquely blessed when Diane agreed that I could be the one to tell her story. Diane's openness and honesty were probably most in evidence on the occasions when she had to employ them in telling her biographer that he didn't know what he was talking about, and obviously had never spent a minute around a racetrack's backstretch. I should mention that in addition to being open and honest, Diane is patient. Thank goodness Diane is patient. Before you can tell my story, she said, during the partnership, I'm going to have to educate you from the ground up about what it means to work with horses. And she proceeded to do so. I received the education of a lifetime in the art and science of preparing and riding thoroughbreds from a true master of the trade. Diane has had an amazing life. That was another advantage for me. And by being the first woman to break from the starting gate of a major American racetrack, she helped open the door for the many women who ride today in this country. Diane rode that groundbreaking first race at Hialeah on February 7th, 1969. And she was also the last of the women who rode in 1969 to retire in 1998. That's nearly 30 years as a jockey, with a few set aside to recover from injuries that would have sent many an athlete permanently to the sidelines. Of course, there will never be another first woman to ride in the Kentucky Derby. But if you stop with that 1970 Derby, you'll have learned only a small fraction of Diane Crump's amazing life journey. Her life was extraordinary before she rode in the Derby at age 21 and has continued to be so for the 51 years that have followed it. I should add here that that's 72 years and counting for both of us, almost to the minute. Here's the coincidence of all coincidences. Diane and I were born on the same day, May 18, 1948. I guess we were intended to collaborate on telling her story. Diane is nothing less than a historic, transformative figure, and she continues to be a force today. She has an unyielding commitment to helping people with a little assistance from her 4 helper dachshunds, and her commitment to her faith is at least as inspirational as her hugely inspiring career in the saddle. So thank you, Diane, for all you've done and all you continue to do. In addition to Diane, there's a woman in my life who I should thank, and of course, that's my wife, Dr. Fran Wintrobe. Fran shares my joy when the writing goes well and my frustration when the words just won't come. And it's no exaggeration to say that I probably wouldn't be here saying these words to you if it weren't for Fran. So thank you, Fran, who's right behind me, although you can't see her. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And there we go. And thanks again, Castleton Lyons, for including me among your 2020 finalists. It's an honor that I hold very dear.
Good.
Excellent. The next book that we will move in, we are, by the way, going in alphabetical order, if anybody wondered, is Good Things Come, which is a novel by Linda Shantz. And this is our debut author, which, as Kay mentioned, is an accomplishment in and of itself to really have a book that makes the cut amongst even semifinalists. To be honest with you, we don't have that many that that end up in that group. So to be amongst the finalists is really quite an achievement. This is a book that tells the story of one-time vet student who ends up pursuing a career as a jockey, but is involved in a racing family and kind of has a lot of twists and turns, as many novels do, but in pursuit of the Queen's Plate. And many of the details, both from the breeding farm perspective, as well as the details surrounding racing at Woodbine and involving the Queen's Plate, were things that, although I've spent time at Woodbine and have covered the Queen's Plate, were revelations for me. The details themselves were great. But Linda, among many things that I have to commend you on, that the art of trying to capture things on the racetrack correctly but explain them in a way that someone who's not familiar with horse racing can understand is a true art. And you did it masterfully, because it didn't detract at all from the story, but it was well done. So that was one of the things that we commented on in terms of the judging, that you did so well in the course of telling what was just a wonderful story as well, and a real pleasure to read. Linda worked at the racetrack for many years and now manages a small herd of retired racehorses. And one of the things for us that we miss out on is the opportunity to get to spend some time with the judges, to get to know you guys a little bit better, where I could do a little bit better job of introducing the judges to everyone. So I am reading off of the books. So if there's something I'm missing, I apologize. But I did note that the artwork that we see is I'm assuming mostly your artwork, because I did check out your website, lindashantz.com, to see your beautiful work that is on display there as well. So I know that in addition to being a very fine writer, you are also an incredible artist. So congratulations for that, as well as your wonderful book, Linda.
Thank you very much, Stephen. First, I want to thank Mr. Ryan for continuing this vision, Dr. Ryan's vision of supporting horse racing literature. Traditional publishing these days doesn't tend to favor fiction about horse racing. So it's just amazing to have an award that supports that. And thank you as well to the judges for considering my book. It's really an amazing honor to be included alongside two very important books like Vicky and Mark's books. And of course, thanks to Betsy for organizing everything. And it really is too bad we can't be together, because I know I'm overdue a visit to Lexington. It's been a few years. It's one of my favorite places. So when Betsy told us we should have a talk prepared, my initial reaction was panic. So yeah, my heart's going right there. I don't think I've made a speech since grade school, when we had to do public speaking in grades 5 and 6. So my first speech was about a horse called Norcliffe, who was the son of Buck Passer, bred by E.P. Taylor. He was a Canadian Horse of the Year and won the Queen's Plate in 1976. And I think you all might be a little more receptive to my speech than the kids in my class were, because they definitely knew I was the crazy horse kid in the class. So those were the early days of my obsession with the Queen's Plate. Like any horse crazy kid in those days, I grew up reading the Black Stallion series, and I was frustrated that they were always about the Kentucky Derby. There was never anything about the Queen's Plate. So I thought I should write one. And early drafts of the story were very much what you'd expect of a kid that age. Black filly that wins everything, no romance, because at that age you don't care about that sort of thing. And there was even an unmanageable black stallion in it. And not to mention that the 70s were a pretty amazing time to grow up a horse racing fan. So needless to say, both the story and I have grown up a bit since then. After I'd actually worked at the racetrack, I had to rewrite it, of course. And a bit of a fun fact, I actually ended up working for Norcliffe Stables. And it was that experience that took me to Payson Park in the winters. And in those days, we still had Hialeah, so I got to experience that. And in Ontario, we had 3 racetracks, and we've lost the track up here since then. And as a writer, you're told over and over again to just stick your first novel in a drawer and forget about it. But I was too stubborn for that. Every so often, I'd rewrite it, and I'd read about all the hoops that you have to go through to get published, and then I just, forget about it for a while again, because that seemed like too intimidating for me. And then about 5 years ago, it got another rewrite, and an author friend who's actually a former Dr. Tony Award finalist, she agreed to read it. And the end result of that was that I tore it apart and rewrote it again. Because my experience at the track was in the 80s, had been originally set in the 80s, but I made the decision to bring it forward into present time. And basically, though, the bones of the story stayed the same. So all along, I wanted to write a story that was about the people and the horses. It seems that any novel that makes it to mainstream fiction is about race fixing or drug abuse. And sadly, that reflects some of the real world stories we're all too familiar with, especially right now. But there are so many good stories, little guys who are in it for the love of the game, for the love of the horses, and people who have foregone more sensible career paths because of the dream. And I think especially in this past year, when everything was upside down, we needed a book about the good guys in racing, about the dreamers, because racing would die without its dreamers. So right now, when Ontario racing is in crisis, it means a lot to me to have a book about Ontario racing recognized. I loved hearing how readers who had never heard of the Queen's Plate learned about it because of this book. This race has such a wonderful history, and it's still the longest continuously run stakes race in North America. And I hope that the pandemic isn't what finally takes that claim away, because right now it's in jeopardy. So I'm so grateful that this award exists. I love that all three finalists are books about women in racing, even if mine is fictional. She definitely owes her involvement in the sport she loves to the likes of Sylvia Rideout Bishop and Diane Clark. So thank you again to everyone and everyone who's supported me on this journey.
Very good.
Our third finalist is Sylvia Rideout Bishop, Had a Way with Horses, a pioneering African-American woman's career training racehorses by Vicky Moon. And as I mentioned, I had spent quite a bit of time in West Virginia and am familiar with many of the people that are mentioned in this book, but had never heard of Sylvia Rideout Bishop. And every book on racing is important in its own right, but I think this book in particular was extremely important and needed to be written, particularly talking about someone that I had never heard of, and her place in the sport. So for that alone, Vicky, well done to you to have gotten this story out there. Vicky is a writer, editor, photographer who's chronicled the lives of many people, famous, not so famous. And boy, talk about subjects, murderers, prominent people for People magazine and the Washington Post. She writes a monthly Life in the Virginia Countryside column over the moon for Washington Life magazine, has reported on hunt balls, steeplechase racing, parties from Palm Beach to Saratoga Springs for Town and Country and Millionaire, has written about homes and gardens for Veranda and Southern Accents, and has been a contributing editor for House and Garden, appeared on A&E Network's City Confidential, served as a producer for Dominic Dunn's Power, Privilege, and Justice, is currently the co-publisher and writer for Country Zest magazine and MiddleburgMystique.com, the author of 9 previous books, many involving horses and racing, lives in Fort Lauderdale and Middleburg, Virginia, and is married to sports writer Leonard Shapiro, and can be reached at vickymoon.com. Vicky.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say to the other 2 writers, Mark and Linda, it's just intoxicating to be with both of you, and I'm thrilled to be a finalist. This book took me 15 years from the moment that I first met this woman, and it was by chance. And excuse me if you've already heard this somewhere, somehow, but I was in a line to get a cup of coffee in Marshall, Virginia, which is like nowhere. And I'll just talk to anybody because I feel that everyone has a story. And I had a contract from my publisher to do a book on women who love horses. And this man said to me, my aunt, she was the first Black woman to train racehorses in Charlestown. And so 2 days later, I found my way to her apartment building. And when I called my publisher to tell her about this and that I only wanted to do this one woman, guess what? She said, good luck. And so she let me keep the small advance. My agent at the time didn't like it, but something told me not to let up. And, I guess my husband will vouch for the fact that when I grab onto something, I'm not letting go. Okay. I mean, I even wrote all these magazine things and probably 2 other books. In the meantime, the woman dies 4 or 5 months after I met her, but she gave me all kinds of photographs. She even gave me her little black book, which I will speak to eventually. And then I just went from there, dug in like the Washington Post taught me to do. And my husband would drop me at the Library of Congress in the morning. And I went through every issue of the Morning Telegraph or the Daily Racing Form, whatever you want to call it. They would have the microfilm waiting for me, and I went through every track. I just didn't go through Charlestown because I found some in Maryland. And one of the best parts of this is I got to go to Cumberland and Hagerstown and Bel Air. I mean, when I entered the track in Cumberland, I cried. It was just so wonderful. And so every time then I would see her name listed, her husband began, as the trainer of note, and eventually she did get her license. But I started, with the first time I saw her. Then I had to get the records for that particular horse. And a wonderful man at the museum in Saratoga, Alan Carter, some of you may know him, some may not, then proceeded to give me the records of every race that horse ever went in. But of course, they would get claimed away from her, or, something would happen. And I had all these index cards. I put it in chronological order. It was the most difficult thing I ever did. And in the end, it was a blessing that it took so long. For example, it ends up one of her best clients was Tyson Gilpin Sr., who I had known, and he was the head of Fasig-Tipton and then an agent and blah, blah, blah. And then I met his son, who had all kinds of family albums of the horses and attending the races and all of that. And it all came together, except then I got a new agent, and that agent, I had to read it on the internet. He died. So then what? Okay, I'm out here in the sticks of Virginia trying to put this thing away. And so I turned to my dear husband, who runs the magazine, and I said, what do you think? And I knew that I was done writing it, and that I had to move forward. And so the magazine published it. And then it turned out I already had it written. And for those who have read it, there's a chapter already in the book called Doubleday, because when things were not right at the track, not necessarily for Sylvia, but at the track, she took a part-time job at a printing press in Berryville, Virginia. Excuse me, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over to Berryville for me. And in the middle of the night, they had an ad on PBS, okay, looking for people to work. And the next morning, I called them out of the clear blue thinking, okay, here I am. I got the only man there who loved horse racing, okay? And they said yes, okay? Now it's now owned by Bertelsmann, the largest privately owned publishing company in the world. Okay, so I got to drive to Berryville to proof the cover, to drop things off and things like that. And then when the book was done, people came out of the building because, of course, COVID, I couldn't go in the building, that had known her when she worked there. And that's what I mean by, it took so long that it was truly a blessing, and I was driven to do this. That's my story.
Well, very good. Well, those are all great stories from all of you, and I hope that when we get this thing online, we have a lot of people can look at the presentation today and hear all your stories and what prompted you to write the book, and the trials and tribulations you go through in writing, which is obviously it's a labor of love, and it takes a long time. And whether it takes 15 years or 2 years, it's a considerable amount of time and effort. And we all appreciate the time and you put into this. And thank you all for telling your story. And hopefully next year you can all join us in Lexington for the event in the Stallion Barn. And we're looking forward to that. So now I have the honor of announcing the winner. And the winner of the 2000 and or the 6th or the 15th annual Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award is Diane Crump by Mark Shrager. Congratulations. So Mark, if you can
Thank
gather
you.
yourself there and you could give us say a few words, we'd appreciate it.
I would be happy to. It'd be a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah, my wife says thank you too. Thank you, Castleton Lyons. Thank you, everyone connected with the Tony Ryan Book Award. This is a one-of-a-kind honor. I'll cherish this for the rest of my life. I've already spoken about Diane Crump and the COVID pandemic, and Diane Crump and my two co-finalists, and Diane Crump and my wife Fran, and Diane Crump and her dachshunds. But I'm the first person at a Tony Ryan Book Award function who's ever even used the word dachshunds. But let me talk just a little bit. Actually, let me rave just a little bit more about Linda Shantz, author of Good Times Come, and Vicky Moon, whose tale of Sylvia Rideout Bishop, who's someone I'd never heard of either, are really deserving. Really deserving. Those are outstanding books. They're both gifted writers. Any of us could have been the 2020 winner. This is not a win mutual. It's a winning pick 3. I'd also like to thank the people at Lyons Press who published my book, particularly Niels Abo, my agent Greg Anapu, and I'd like to thank all the people, Diane's friends and relatives and strangers who I went to Virginia to interview or did on the phone, and who shared their memories with me to an extent that I would never have believed. And let me just one more little thing is talk about, again, the 3 finalists are biography of women pioneers in a sport that's always been reluctant about allowing women to compete. And the third one is a fictional account of a young woman and some of the grief she encounters, mostly, unfortunately, from my gender, as she struggles to begin what she hopes to be a successful riding career. I mean, way to go, Castleton Lyons. 3 books about women jockeys and trainers. Your recognition of me encourages me to work even harder to try and bring you another one. And in the meantime, as several of us have said, let's meet again next year in Kentucky this time and celebrate your 2021 crop of finals. Again, thank you so very much.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, any last words?
Yes, I'd just like to say that, this is an award process that is in a great part overseen by Betsy Hager here at Castleton Lyons Farm. She is also the one that physically collects books and gets them all out to the authors. And when we do have in-person ceremonies, she's very much involved in the setting up of the ceremonies and taking care of all of us. But one thing we don't do as an award really is we don't go out of our way to contact every publisher in the United States to remind them that this award exists. We certainly send out press releases about the nominations being open to all the racing publications. But I just want that anyone who's out there watching this to, if you know of someone who's writing a book about thoroughbred horse racing and they're not aware of this award, please let them know. I know, for example, I mean, sometimes I'll see a trend such as the University Press of Kentucky. They now have a Horses in History track where we've had other finalists and other books, semi-finalists that were published out of that press. I think Milt Toby's Dancer's Image might have been one of the first ones under that imprint. And I like to think that maybe we had something to do with that, maybe, knowing that there was a goal you could strive for with this award. It certainly didn't hurt to have an imprint of your press that covered horse racing history. But certainly let your friends, let your fellow authors know, let book lovers know. We do have a presence now on Facebook, and we will get more information out about the book award itself, about some of the other books. Some of the books weren't mentioned tonight. Last year's winner, Better Lucky Than Good, they recently did a podcast with lots of interviews of some of the same people mentioning last year's book award winner. We would love for you, all of you, the finalists, semi-finalists, let us know about your next book. I know, Linda, you've got a follow-up to Good Things Coming. In fact, a couple of them I've seen pre-orders on. So keep us in touch with that. We would love to be out there and help promote your books and let other racing fans know that they're out there.
Okay, very good. So I'm sure Betsy will be getting in touch with all of you to get your addresses and get a check and your award out to you. Thanks again for everybody's participation in this award ceremony. As usual, it's very enlightening. It's just wonderful just hearing all the individual author stories. That's really what makes the event. It's just it's a great thing to hear. So thanks again for your participation. Congratulations to the winner and also to the runners up. And we hope to see everybody next spring for the 16th award. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Very good job, everybody.
Congrats, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.